Today, I'm excited to announce our first speaker to kick off CSCON Day 3. It's a dear friend of ChainSafe with one of the most interesting titles I've seen today, where Terry Culver, the CEO of ETC Labs. And Terry, we're just promoting you up right now. Uh-oh. So Terry, unmute your mic and camera, and you should be hopping into the stage immediately.
Hey there, Greg.
Hey, Terry. Let's give a little mic check, and then I'll let you have the floor.
All right. Can you hear me?
It's loud and clear. Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks, Greg, and thanks to ChainSafe for allowing me to talk today. Here, let me get my screen up. Great. So today, where the wild things are, I wanted to talk about some new paradigms for distributed networks, and especially the communities, the social layer that exist in blockchain. First of all, I am Terry Culver from Ethereum Classic Labs. We work on trying to build and expand the Ethereum Classic Network. We do this primarily in two ways. One, we have a core team of developers who help maintain the protocol and build tooling and so on. We also have an accelerator where we provide grant support, funding, investment to early stage projects to help build out the ecosystem. We've been at it for about 2.5 years now, and feel like we're just getting started. You know, we've learned a fair bit along the way, and I think that will inform our roadmap in 2021, which we hope to share more about in January and February. So let's jump in. First of all, the reason I started thinking about this topic was the work that we've been doing with ChainSafe over the last several months on Chain Bridge, which has gotten some discussion over the last couple of days. And I'm very pleased to let everybody know that we've just launched with ChainSafe a chain bridge for converting ETC to DAI. And you can go check it out at wetc.etclabs.org. And this will allow you to wrap your Ethereum Classic token and convert it into DAI. And, we decided to build and launch this bridge, one, in practical terms, because there's a lot of people in the ETC community who want direct access to DeFi. And we hope to use this bridge for connecting to other platforms, but also because it represents our approach to growing Ethereum Classic. And I think it also represents an approach that ChainSafe exemplifies, which is to look for areas of collaboration and connection. That's something that I think really is a characteristic of all their work, and certainly with all the work they've done with us. And it's something that we appreciate and share. I think that there's an important need for more collaboration and versatility among blockchains. And in thinking about this bridge and helping to build it, I started to think about why this doesn't happen more often and why it's even sometimes a controversial topic. And I think it goes back to how we actually conceive of blockchain networks to begin with. Many people have probably seen these diagrams. They seem to be ubiquitous in any discussion about how blockchain works. They pop up in news articles all the time. They're used to describe the difference between a centralized network and a healthy blockchain network of the kind we're trying to build. And while they may be suitable for talking about the network at a technical level, the model represented here is actually problematic, particularly at a social level. And that's for a number of reasons. The first is that the provenance of the diagram is enough to give us pause. It's derived from military planning during the Cold War. It was first published in a memo entitled On Distributed Communications, written by Paul Barron in, I think, 1964. for the RAND Corporation and paid for by the United States Air Force. And, at first glance, it may seem odd that it would turn up as a cornerstone of blockchain network design. It doesn't exactly reflect, the character of blockchain communities as I know them to date. But that's okay. It's fine to appropriate the model. And in fact, around the same time, the RAND Corporation was also conducting military-sponsored research on augmenting the human intellect, which led to the computers and devices that we use today. So it's not that I would exclude the model on the basis that, it was originally designed for a different purpose. But I think it's important to highlight the three features about the model that are often overlooked, and I think reduce the relevance it has for blockchain communities. The first is that, even though the, model represents decentralized and distributed networks and the advantage of those, it was designed to exist in the larger context of a strict military chain of command. And I think, that goes hand in hand with how the network is supposed to operate. And so while information is spread across the network without bias, authority is not. It's still very centralized in some level. The second was that, the network was really only meant to be utilized in the extenuating and extremely hazardous conditions of being under attack. It wasn't designed for long-term employment. It assumes a state of constant adversity, where every external entity is a threat, where every unknown participant is an attack. It takes an extremely pejorative point of view on any actor who's not already part of the network. And the last feature that I think is important to highlight is that, the network construction is permanently defensive. It makes it prioritizes protection from external threats above all else. A group of nodes communicate with peers so that there's no single point of failure. That's great. It helps provide security. It helps provide, Byzantine fault tolerance and all those good things. But it may not actually be a suitable model for blockchain communities as they grow. As a social network, this model is a vulnerability and can actually limit growth. It may have been helpful or necessary at the early stage, when you have a new and fragile community that's trying to survive. And many blockchain communities have loyal members, but the fact is they all struggle with adoption and with how to grow and how to provide social and economic value to a wider group of people. And for that to occur, I think we need to reconceive of how we think about and imagine the social layer. Blockchain communities need to become more versatile, inclusive, permeable even. They need to become more open to new and challenging ideas, even to criticism or rigorous reflection. There are actually many risks to not doing so. Over time, a blockchain community can suffer from confirmation bias. It can resist change. It can become hyper-specialized, where a blockchain community becomes adapted to a very narrow or specific environment, really isolated, unable to grow. It can evolve from what's supposed to be an innovation into a mutation. I think also blockchain communities need to look for positive sum collaborations with each other, because the truth is no blockchain community will succeed long-term on its own. The technology is really too new for any single community to address the universal challenges of scalability, of security, accessibility, governance, and so on. The tribal or maximalist perspective that is ubiquitous in blockchain is very short-sighted. It's based on the fallacy that first movers or exclusionary practices will result in market power over the long term. But, consider the sobering fact that only about 5% of first movers in any emerging market, and blockchain is an emerging market, end up gaining any kind of market power. The idea that first mover advantage, while popular, leads to success isn't really true. More often than not, it leads to failure. More often than not, the first people to try to develop and implement a new technology are usually not the people who become dominant in the end. And first mover advantage or platform dominance is almost always a failure when the pace of technological change is fast, but the rate of adoption is slow. And this is exactly where blockchain development is at the moment. The technology is moving very fast. If you think about the amount of change and development and innovation that's occurred over the last several years, it's remarkable. But yet, it's still actually not something that has found a widespread use for most people in the world, or even a large percentage of people in the world. And so there is a real risk that all the good work that people are doing to try to develop these technologies will fall flat. Success in these circumstances relies usually on deep pockets for many years, on prodigious amounts of luck. And, by trying to be dominant at the early stage of a technology's life cycle, you spend a lot of time and money solving new problems while competitors take advantage of and learn from your mistakes. Widespread adoption is most often achieved by second or third generation projects. So the point here is that history is littered with examples of failed technology projects that tried to establish monopolies too soon at the cost of new ideas and innovation. And blockchain will be no different. Even if the technology is, the way it develops will and has so far mirrored the development of other innovative technologies. Blockchain communities that continue to take a tribal or zero-sum approach risk becoming increasingly isolated, eccentric platforms that the world leaves behind. I like to think of it as, the dodo birds of blockchain, and there will be many. I believe that success in this sector and with emerging technology will come through collaboration, flexibility, and, as I mentioned, pragmatism. And I think it's helpful to look at natural systems for new paradigms of how we could build blockchain communities. To start to think about blockchain communities as organisms that grow, that evolve, that change, and that mutate. And I'd like to start with Bipartite Networks, where these are networks where different organisms engage in an ongoing transactional resource and consumer relationship. They're not necessarily friends, they're not necessarily partners, but they each have something that the other needs, and they're able to swap it regularly and consistently without adversity. And so, one of the most interesting examples of this is fungal networks, or, mycorrhizal networks, or commonly known as mushrooms or shrooms. This here is a map of a mycorrhizal network underground and how it relates to plants. So typically the fungal networks will intertwine with plant networks, with root systems, and they will swap different nutrients that each other needs. So here in this map, this is a map of a temperate forest in Japan underground. So the red are plants, and the blue and yellow are different types of mycorrhizal networks. And the way it works is that the plants provide carbon and sugars to the fungus, and the fungus provides phosphorus and nitrogen in return. And this is just a consistent exchange, and they swap at the cellular level. So it's not even so much as a bridge, it's that they really combine communities and forces to get what each other needs. The second interesting, I think, model to look at is biological mutualism, which is something I think a lot of people are familiar with. When organisms evolve to rely on ongoing cooperation with each other, and so there's the archetype of the crocodile and the plover. If you're like me and you never really quite fully trust the crocodile, there's also other examples like the oxtail and the zebra over here on the bottom. And the last model that I would look at is this little creature here called a leaf sheep. It's really just a sea slug, which the name doesn't really match the form. And in addition to its magical form, it's really the only animal known to be able to photosynthesize light into food through a process called kleptoplasty. It eats algae, it retains the chloroplasts that it's eaten in the algae, and through photosynthesis, it's able to convert that into nutrients. So basically, it's a solar-powered animal. It eats light. And besides that being incredibly interesting, to me, I think it applies to the ways in which blockchain communities should look to grow, where they can be versatile and adaptable, where they can look at unusual, unique, or different sources of nutrition, new ideas, and opportunity. And with that, I would like to thank ChainSafe again for letting me speak today, and also thank ChainSafe again for being such a good partner. They've worked with us for a couple of years now on several of the successful Ethereum Classic hard forks, and most recently on the deployment of ChainBridge. And we look forward to working with you folks in the future. Thanks so much.
Hey, Terry, that's awesome. Thanks so much. I think honestly, I've learned a little bit of something with your analogy on how the plant systems there work, which is really interesting. And honestly, that tribalism, like little spiel there too, is really resonates with me. I think a lot because I did a lot of talks on that back in the day, and I think it's a really interesting point to make too, right? That definitely gives off a really bad feel, for somebody new wanting to come into a community. Can you guys hear me? Are you good there, Terry? Yeah, cool. Awesome. Yeah, we have a few Q&As for you. So we'll go through those and go from there. So first up, what are some of the strategies that you've employed to foster an environment that resists confirmation bias and deference to authority?
So to resist confirmation bias, what we try to do is talk to as many people outside of our immediate community as possible. It's kind of like a reality check, so what we think might be a good idea for the network, I'll go talk to someone who, maybe thinks ETC is a dead chain and see what they say. And not that I'm looking to get them to agree, but they're looking at our community from a different perspective. And as much as I might not like what they have to say, I want to be aware of that before we move in that direction. In terms of the question about authority, that's actually something we haven't had to worry about in ETC. It's a pretty anti-authoritarian community. I think if anybody tried to position themselves as taking charge, there would be a rabid group of community members to make sure that they understood how things are supposed to work.
Makes sense. Definitely seen that in action once or twice while working with you guys. What led you to looking at for inspiration for ideas and solutions to blockchain communities? Actually, a really interesting question.
Because at the end of the day, blockchain is a technology, but it's also deployed by people. It's used by people. So we can build all kinds of cool things, but unless they're relevant to people, unless they're providing value, they're not going to go anywhere. And I think, that means that, even though we're looking for permissionlessness and trustlessness, you still have all the complicated relationships that exist in any community. And so I started thinking about natural environments where you have communities that, operate in a way that may be decentralized or have an intrinsic form of collaboration that allows for positive sum gains rather than zero sum ones.
Awesome. And finally, how can we start changing a blockchain community, or at least beginning the conversation that is decentralized to ensure we don't become the dodo bird of blockchain?
I think one thing is that I think all blockchain communities can become more inclusive. Right. I think on the whole, blockchain communities do a terrible job of bringing in new members and people who aren't already fans or loyalists, or however you want to describe it. I think, blockchain communities overall need almost like a grassroots outreach campaign. I think we also need easy ways for people to participate. If you're a developer, there's clearly things for you to do. But if you're not a developer, if you're passionate about what blockchain can do for people, but yet, you don't know how to write code, what can you do? And I think there's a lot of things that people can do, but I think we need to make that easier for folks to take on and begin to run with.
Definitely makes a lot of sense, helping out the developer community for sure. Thank you. Thank you, Terry. That's the end of the Q&A. Let me just check again. Yep, that seems like them all. Thanks again for coming out and kicking off today. Really happy that you're able to give us that presentation. And hopefully everybody kind of took away something from that. Just want to say thanks again from the whole ChainSafe crew for coming out today.
My pleasure. Looking forward to the rest of the day.